Welcome to UO Today. I'm Paul Pepis, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Today we are in the Barker Gallery of the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. The gallery displays Vision of Nature, Vessel of Beauty, an exhibition of work by the Eugene artist Keith Achepohl. Achepohl created this work from inspiration from his experiences at the Morris Graves Foundation Artist Residency, The Lake, in Loleta, California. Jill Hartz, the executive director of the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art, co-curated this exhibit with McCosh Associate Curator Danielle Knapp. Thank you both for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jill, why don't I start with you? Tell us what inspired you and Danielle to organize this exhibit.
I think if I go back 6 years or so ago to when Keith came back from his first residency at the Morris Graves Foundation and started showing us work produced then, especially the Skunk Cabbage series, we were overwhelmed with how beautiful it was and just how intense and amazing these works were. And I guess realizing how much the residency had affected Keith. So we knew we wanted to show those works. What we didn't know, but we learned pretty quickly, is that the residency, no, thank goodness, but the residency didn't just, bring on the skunk cabbages. It started off this incredibly fertile period of Keith making art inspired by his stay there in so many different media that he would bring one in, or we would go to his studio and look at others. And we realized, I think maybe over 2 years ago, that this could not be contained in, say, the Schnitzer Gallery, but that we needed to reserve the Barker to really show the breadth of what happened as a result of that experience, which is just continuing still. But the show had to have an end. I mean, what's interesting, I think, in the show, and we plan for everything that's in it, is that we have 2 works outside the gallery with the intro panels, and we basically took those off Keith's dining room tables. I don't even know if they were dry yet, but it's like, oh, we have to have these too.
So Keith, tell us about your journey to the lake. How did you wind up there?
Well, one applies. It's a remarkable thing because Graves left his absolutely beautiful acreage to set up a foundation, a wonderful foundation that would allow one artist at a time to stay there for up to 3 weeks and live and work in the studio that Graves had built for himself. So for 3 weeks, I was allowed to be there. And one simply applies, and and then you're allowed to be there for up to 3 weeks. And there are no rules or regulations about what you do there.
Except no New York Times, I understand.
Well, yes, we can get into that. That was very sweet, actually. But yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, tell us a little bit about your own history with Graves, because there's a Graves connection for you. It wasn't like...
Very much so, and it goes on. When I was in college, Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois, I was there at a time when there was an article in the New York Times, I believe, wasn't it?
Okay.
New York
Yeah, I
Times?
think so.
Right.
That's right.
About Graves and about the foundation, and no, it wasn't the foundation.
Was it the
at that
Mystic
point.
Poets, Mystic
Yes,
Painters of the
yes,
Northwest?
it was a show about the Mystic Poets of the Northwest, and Graves was one of them that was featured in that show. And the show was brought to my attention by one of my professors there, a wonderful man named Harlan Decayed, And he thought I might like what was there, what I saw, and I did, because I, as a young artist, had already spent many years acknowledging that nature meant a great deal to me. Because I think even in grade school, I was paying attention to nature. So when I saw what they reproduced, I was quite moved by it. It was a time of Birchfield and some of the classic American naturists, I guess we'd call them, people who loved working from nature. And so I had already tracked onto what Graves was doing to American art at the time, which was into abstraction. And so it was a beautiful thing, a beautiful symbiosis of what he was interested in, what I was interested in. And it all kind of melded together.
So you've called your experience there like going to a monastery. How did it, what did you learn and how did it change your work to be there?
Well, you're invited to acknowledge that nature is there, and if we want to take advantage of it being there, we can. And I thought it was an opportunity to play, in a sense, with the things I'd already been playing with. So it was a great melding of things. And I took it as an opportunity. Well, I applied, and fortunately was given the opportunity to be there. They selected me as one of the people that could take advantage of what was there.
I understand that the Skunk Cabbage series was the first series that you started working on.
Exactly. They don't, the application in no way dictates what you have to do when you're there. And I like that, of course. And in fact, when I got there, I really didn't know what I was going to do. But you have to write a statement in order to get there to show that maybe you're a serious artist and that you know what the place is about. And that's what you wanted at that point. And you know, already I was of a certain age that meant I had to have known by then what exactly I was all about. So I thought that over and applied and ended up being there. The extraordinary thing was when I got there, I really didn't know, and I didn't have to know exactly what I was going to do when I was there. So I unloaded my car and immediately started looking around because I thought well, okay, now I'm here, what do I do? And so that was the first thing right away, is walking around and finding out what that place could mean to me and how I could take what I'd been given, this extraordinary place. And we are given his studio to live and work in. It's a big, beautiful studio with one room that has a studio and a single bedroom, a little kitchen, a little bathroom, and that's it. And you make of it what you want to. And for me, that meant looking around and trying to figure out how that place could provide me with what I needed to do something in. And I wandered around that first afternoon and actually started doing a number of drawings of plants. And a lot of drawings, just a lot of pencil drawing. The lovely thing is, I don't think I really felt any pressure right away to do anything. I just knew that I needed to come up with something. I don't waste time, which means, I guess, simply that I get to work and I do it. And I looked around, made some quite simple drawings, and then there's a front door and a back door. So I walked in the front door, which connects the house with the studio. And after that, I did the opposite and walked out the kitchen door, and off the kitchen was a little deck. And off that deck was a big pool full of skunk cabbage. And I took a look at those and I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna live here. and that's what I did. That became the subject. And oddly enough, what was there was not too different from a lot of the work I'd done before, in that I have some large plants in my gardens back in Iowa City. And and right away there's a kind of assimilation and a kind of realization that there was something about the skunk cabbage and some other plants that I'd worked with before that right away made me think I could work with those again. The shapes are marvelous. And so the second morning, I knew what I was going to do. and it was playing with the skunk cabbage.
Well, those works are striking because many of them are paintings of decaying and ragged skunk cabbage. Say a little bit about how you approach that. Why plants that are decayed are as interesting to you as flowering plants? Why are you drawn to both kinds of plant life?
Decayed is an interesting word to use because to me they weren't. And I love plants that are coming and going. Life is coming and going. So really all of this is about the life and death of plants. What we're going through is life and death. And Graves, of course, dealt a great deal with all of that. And that's always been part of what I liked about him. He didn't shun any of that. And it's very beautiful to be able to acknowledge that. So the plants I'd worked on for so long, for decades in terms of fading in and out of my life, were plants very much like those skunk cabbage. And so it was easy to combine the old and the new in terms of what was a subject matter. And I love that part of it. So it began there, but then so much of it just kept growing from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I like that part of it. I've always loved that part of it.
One of the things that's notable about the show is how many different media you use throughout the various series. There are 9 series, and you use all these different media. I'm sitting across from the Tree Conversation series, which is the series that has the largest works. And these works are oil paintings on raw canvas. Tell us about that. That's not a typical thing for a painter who paints oils to do, is it? To paint on raw canvas.
No, it isn't, because I think most artists think about the life and death of the canvas, you know? And so they harbor the idea that this must be on canvas. And I just took a chance, and as a matter of fact, I had met a curator and a restoration man at Museum of Modern Art, and I discussed this with him. And the way I was working was, in a sense, without oil, and it's the oil that helps the canvas decay. Mm-hmm. So if I eliminated that, I don't have to worry about that. And so that's what I decided to do. I wanted to keep it simple. And if you look at the back of these, there is no staining coming through.
So you just worked with the pigments?
I just worked with pigment coming out of the tube.
Huh.
And didn't add more.
Interesting,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
You've said that you don't think of yourself as a landscape painter. In some of these series, though, and I'm thinking of Forest Walks and Forest Fragments, you've painted these intimate close-ups of tree trunks and bark that are themselves almost like landscapes. It's as if you're inhabiting the landscape of the surface of the bark. Why is such an intense and up-close portrayal of these plants and trees such an important part? What are you trying to communicate to your viewer about that kind of intimacy with nature?
The closer you can get to it, the better off, or the better experience you'll have with it. And that's really important to me. I run into so many people in the Northwest who tell me that I just came back from a walk in the forest. And then I will say, well, what did you do? What did you see? Tell me, where were you? Which trail did you take? And then I get that kind of a, what do you mean? What did I see? I saw trees. I said, well, can you describe them? Can you tell me more about what you felt while you were looking at them? I mean, what was your experience with them? And can you put it into words? What was it all about? And often they don't know what they saw because they didn't bother to look. Oh, what a waste. So it just becomes a kind of wondrous thing to me that these people haven't really seen much. And I hope, if anything, the people who look at these things get anything out of it, it's that they, next time they go out there, they do look a little more closely and find out there's more to see.
Well, and sometimes, rather than landscapes, I think of them as portraits.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very much so. because yeah, I mean, what did you see, and did it have any meaning, and did it make you want to walk around it to find out that one tree you just looked at isn't one tree, isn't one view that so many of these, well, especially when you get to the pencil drawings, which to me are, in a way, my favorites. Well, art comes from something very intimate, and I don't know how much more intimate you can get than a very close, neighborly look at a tree and realize that you can turn it around, especially with the drawings. They were made on my dining room table with little tree fragments. Some of those, I was holding in my hand like this, drawing like this, because I really wanted to see, what does that little fucker look like? Come on. What if I turn it over? What am I going to see? And most people don't bother doing that, And you can look that closely at something and turn it over, turn that little twig over, and find out that you do see something different all the time.
The series that we're sitting in front of is the Forest Scene series, which includes the largest number of individual works of any of the series in the show. And this series is also unusual in the show because these are painted in acrylic. What was it about acrylic that made it the right medium for this numerous series?
Okay, you mentioned earlier that I do change media. I change media because every time I work on one media or another, I'm learning something. And art is about learning. Making art tells me what I'm thinking. Art helps define who I am. And that, after all, is what being a human being is. And for artists especially, every time you play with a new media, you're learning something different. And I love that part of it, of course. And so it's always taking on some kind of a challenge. The first pieces are all on paper. The minute you switch media, you're learning something quite different. And so when I'm finding out while I'm working on skunk cabbage with watercolor, I'm learning what those media can tell me. And the minute I move to another media, I'm finding out something different about materials. And I'm moving from necessarily a flat media to one that's quite different. Mm-hmm. So after I worked on the skunk cabbages, I realized they're flat. It's a kind of a flat media. Some people say it's three-dimensional, whatever. Well, they are what they are. Different people see different things in them. So.
What was it about acrylic what did you learn about acrylic from this series?
Well, with acrylic, I can work so much faster. Oil paint, I learned earlier on that oil takes a long time to dry generally. So you can't work as quickly, and you have to think about that. So that's a major consideration.
The show also includes a gorgeous triptych entitled Vessel, and that the title of the show alludes to that triptych. Tell us about that group of works and why the idea of the vessel is so important for this show.
Well, I think the idea of the vessel got tied together with the museum asking me to do the grave show. Vessels were extremely important to graves. Vessels we think of as more or less sacred objects. And I like how he used that and kind of revered those objects. And of course that was tied to his being very, very interested in sacred objects. I mean, his tying himself to the Northwest and to ancient art from the Orient was terribly important to him. It also supplied him with some kind of understanding of religion in art. I mean, and however you want to absorb that term religion with him, it's there. And the vessels, some of the drawings in that show are sacred objects, you know, and so that became important to me too.
And I think where you started with the triptych, I remember you saying that in looking at so much of Graves's work, because we have the largest public collection of works on paper, so for someone who can create all of this from residencies and looking closely at nature, it was, okay, Keith, would you do this show? Because it's such a wonderful
It's a no-brainer.
that explores, you know, more of that. But I think, and I may get this wrong, that you had said in looking through Graves' work, although he has the vessels which are, you know, which nature is kind of put in some ways or shown from, one of the largest vessels at the lake is the lake, but that he very seldom did anything with water. But I think your triptych comes from being in that studio in a way and looking, but I may be wrong.
You're right on.
Okay.
And I have to say that on that note, I have to draw this to a close. I'm sorry to say our time has sped by.
We were just getting into something really interesting.
I know. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I've been speaking with artist Keith Achepohl and with Jill Hartz, the executive director of the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. Keith Achepohl, Vision of Nature, Vessel of Beauty, is on view at the museum through April 29th, 2018. It is a spectacular show. I urge all of our viewers to come see it. Thanks so much for watching.